Welcome to the first episode of the Health, Healing, and Humanity podcast with myself, Joe Viola. Every week I have staff and students to discuss the many aspects that our academic theme provides. The idea of health is broad and means more than being free of disease. Health and healing are deeply connected to humanity, especially as was witnessed with COVID-19. Health and healing still go way beyond the pandemic, and we are compelled to learn more about health and the world. Humanity is inevitably linked, and we must find ways to help each other contribute to healing. A PhD from Columbia University and a political science professor from Illinois Wesleyan. We have Greg Shaw with us today. How's it going?
Hello, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So just to start, do you mind talking about what you guys do revolving around the theme?
Sure, yeah. So I have a health policy course that focuses on the American context that I do generally once a year. And it attracts political science students, but also others who are coming out of or angling to go into health professions. This semester is kind of fun. I have 10 bio pre-med students who are doing this as part of a broadening of the curriculum over on the bio side to help them understand health professions more broadly and have people in the room who are coming from a different perspective. We cover a little bit of history in terms of how we got here to the state of affairs that we have in a rather complicated, quite expensive health system in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
We take about a week to dip into a few other countries' healthcare systems. So students pick a country that they want to learn something more about, and in small groups they do some presentations on that. And that sets up some useful vocabulary and comparative perspective that we can say, oh, maybe France does something, or maybe Japan does something that we admire, or the major payer systems, so Medicare, Medicaid, and private insurance. And then we jump into the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare and pick that apart in terms of how it came to be, what it does, what it's supposed to be doing, unfinished business, and then we spend a little bit of time looking at the economics of healthcare as well. So maybe it's not glamorous to talk about, but at some point you need to talk about the money side of this. Throughout, we have a few people, outside practitioners, come in to talk to us. So usually it's people from the county health department, or I usually get a chief financial officer from one of the hospitals to come in and talk about finance issues, and so we have a lot of fun with it. It's a good experience.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Something that stuck out to me when you sent me your syllabus is that you guys examine the health politics in the United States, which is kind of something, especially today with all the vaccination politics that a lot of people have to deal with, unfortunately. Is there like a portion that you guys talk about with that and everything? How to just be all on the same page?
Yeah. So that the issue here, of course, is not just facts, right? It's not just a case of getting people good, following the science or whatever that tagline might be, is only part of the issue. An awful lot of it comes down to trust.
Mm-hmm.
So it speaks to just garden variety things like, am I going to follow through on my meds that my doctor tells me to take? So that speaks to trust, right? Do I trust my providers? Do I think they're doing right by me? And that's a fairly complicated, very emotional bundle of issues right there. And that, of course, is playing out in a major way, as we all know, about masks and vaccinations and so forth, and belief in what we think we know about how viruses mutate. And it's interesting, right? Because the economists like to think of this in through the lens of a economic person. The fact that often doesn't happen. And health clinical people on the clinical side of healthcare, they have well-developed understandings of what works, but then of course that runs into the reality of people's biases around where they think they get good quality information, who they trust. And so it's fair to say that the people who are as yet vaccinated are generally lower social trust people. So it's a really useful concept, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Also tend to have lower trust in domestic political institutions, and it even stretches so far as international political institutions. So people who don't trust, it's a little too simple to say it this way, but people who generally don't trust their neighbors don't trust Congress or the United Nations either. And so that idea of social trust is really key, and I think we're only beginning to learn about how pervasive that is. So we do some of that, yeah.
Particularly with your course again, how do you think it would be taught differently if it was 3 to 4 years prior to this date?
Yeah, well, quite similarly, actually, there are this pandemic at some point will end, and we will go back to whatever our new normal will be. And when this becomes endemic, I suppose we'll use that language. Medicaid and private insurance has been with us for a number of decades and will be with us for the foreseeable. And so students need to learn that. They need to grapple with the political issues, the current day debates that we're having, shift some. But an awful lot of the rest of the material, I think, has legs and works pretty well through time. And so, but an awful lot of the rest of the material works pretty well, whether it's before or after.
Yeah. So right now I'm working on next year's academic theme for 2022-2023. So basing our production off of this next year's theme, this theme, Health, Healing, and Humanity, was devised at the end of 2019, which is pretty long ago. To give some context to like some of the bigger things that were happening.
Very long ago.
Yeah, we got the Keystone pipeline leaking 300,000 gallons of oil, Illinois motion to legalize marijuana becoming the 11th legal state, and the House of Representatives voted to impeach President Trump, removing the vote to Senate. All three things seemed like the biggest deal at the time, and look where we've come now. It's just also casual that all these things have happened now. So that being said, being around Wesleyan for a good amount of time, how has Wesleyan changed in that time from the end of 2019 to now?
Oh, wow. Well, gosh, we've all had a lot of time to think about that question, haven't we?
Yeah.
So on the, beyond the sort of the nuisance that social distancing can be, although, Joe, I'm going to try to focus on a couple of positive things because I'm determined to take some things away from this pandemic, other than bad. So what do I do a little bit better now than I did before? I pay more attention to laying out a really clear syllabus and very clear rules of the road for how we are to progress under, when we can be together and how the class goes forward during those moments when it cannot. So I think you'd have to ask my students, but I think I've become quite a bit more clear and explicit about expectations because, they deserve that. They deserve to know what they're getting into and during these difficult times. And so I'd like to think that I've moved further in their direction. At the same time, I've become more adaptable about how we get there, right? So it's not that due dates go out the window, but rather, how you get that paper to me. I'm a lot more adaptable about that because, listen, if you're in lockdown at home and can't electronically access, I don't know, library resources, say, although the library staff has done a superb job on that front, then I need to show some adaptability because, at the end of the day, this education thing that we do is not just teaching students to to follow rules. Presumably you can learn that in elementary school, but it's to learn stuff and learn how to be creative. And I found myself being quite a bit more flexible about how we get the work done. So I worked at that, and yes, I've figured out how to deliver online courses, and it's not it's still not my first, go-to option because I think there's something really fundamental about getting people face-to-face, wrestling with each other and so forth. But, I think we've got a skill set that we didn't have before. So I'm going to try to focus on the upside.
Yeah, that is something that I've actually noticed a lot of professors have kind of shocked. I guess the students everybody's adapted a lot better than I thought. I feel like professors are a lot more lenient as students are with professors, and just overall more understanding of everybody's situation. And it's unfortunate that a global pandemic had to make that the case, but we ultimately got to this point, and I hope that that's one of the things that education at Wesleyan specifically can keep going forward, is that open communication.
I think that's right. Listen, we all fall down at some point, right? We all have a stumble, and we mess up a class, we mess up a job, whatever. And I'm really convinced that the difference between people who are really successful and those who are less so are your ability to get back up. And so I think many of us have been quite adaptable. I noticed that some of my students really struggle with this, and I don't think it's a lack of intellectual firepower on their part. It's just youth, right? So at my age, I've seen some stuff, I grew up during the Cold War, and we survived that, and so we can, most of the setbacks that occur on any given day are bumps in the road. They're not, fundamental derailments. But that's coming from a person of who's been around the track a little bit more, and so some of my students probably think that we're all going to hell in a handbasket here, but I'm convinced that we will push on through this, and we will adapt, and we will become better at what we do. And with age, they will come to see that as well, and it'll just lower the stress level. I'm confident.
Yeah, that is definitely another perspective I never really thought of. A lot of young people don't have a lot of world events to grab from that are
Right.
as.
That's right. Right. With age, it gets better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the choice of the intellectual theme was really useful, right? Because it touches on so many different aspects of what we do, and health is so fundamental to us, not only in terms of things like just longevity and mobility, but our ability to live rewarding, thriving lives. And so many of our fields touch on those issues. And I'm just really tickled that I've been able to teach during a time when Wesleyan has latched a hold of the theme and the disciplines on these issues.
Mm-hmm. So one final question, and then we'll get out of here.
Sure.
When my friend asked me this question, I thought it was a really good question. It is, if there was another COVID pandemic, what would you do differently? He said he would shave his head.
Oh.
And that is not the way I was going with my thought process.
If I saw it coming, what would I do differently? I don't know. Maybe I would just reset my expectations that things are going to be different for a while, but that we are clever people, and we will find ways to press on through, and we will do work in different ways. There are some things that we will stop doing for a while, but yeah, I think getting myself in the right headspace to be adaptable has been tricky, right? It was hard for us in the beginning. We didn't know where this was going and how long it would last. Yeah, in one sense, this has been a pretty emotional roller coaster ride for folks, right? And I'm in that camp. That applies to me too. So
yeah. I would definitely agree. Since I transferred here after my freshman year at another institution, I started here my sophomore year, and then my second semester sophomore year we were sent home. So I wish that I would have told myself, like,
yeah,
Joe, prepare yourself. This is going to be around to the end of senior year, just so I could be, I guess, more optimistic. I would have a timeline,
Yeah. So we're in this exercising of making lemonade, right? We've been served a lot of lemons, but the clever people will find a way through this and be better for it. I'm going to keep my chin up and hope that most of the people around me will do the same.
Yeah, I think that's really all we can do. It has been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you
Likewise.
for coming and talk to me.
Happy to do it, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, no problem. It's awesome to hear, especially staff, their opinion on everything that's happening, because I only get the perspective of my peers, obviously, consistently.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting hearing what all these finely educated people have to say above me.
Thanks, Joe.
No problem.